Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com. The ancient, big-bodied relatives of modern-day humans not only ate freshwater shellfish, but engraved their shells and used them as tools, according to a new study. Researchers in Java, Indonesia, discovered engravings on a shell that dates to between 540,000 and 430,000 years ago. Is that amazing? The human ancestor. Well, up next, we're going to check in with an expert. The forbidden archaeologist, Michael Cremo, joins us on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. We've got an exciting hour for you now, and we've got an exciting program for you starting next hour as well. Michael Cremo, the forbidden archaeologist. Of course, he's written a number of other works. He is known, of course, as a pioneer in really investigating the age of mankind, archaeological anomalies as well. And welcome back, Michael. Always a pleasure. Hope your Thanksgiving went well last week.
It went well. I didn't eat any turkeys. I'm a vegetarian, but I had a vegetarian Thanksgiving dinner that I enjoyed very much.
What? No turkey on Thanksgiving? That's sacrilegious, Michael.
I know. That's the way I am.
So this little discovery of a 500,000-year-old shell with a little etching on it, talking about humankind. But, you know, in talking to you since 1997, Michael, I've learned that humankind might be millions and millions of years older than that, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, this recent discovery of the little engraved shell is interesting. It's a step in the right direction for mainstream archaeologists because up to this point, the oldest kinds of engravings of symbolic marks that they have recognized are less than 100,000 years old. But if you look at what I've put together in my book, Forbidden Archaeology, there are a lot of cases that go much further back in time than that, and much further back in time than this new discovery. I mean, just speaking about engraved shells, for example, there was the case of an engraved shell that was found in England at a place called Walton-on-Naze, which is on the eastern coast of England, on the North Sea coast. A shell was found there with a simple human face carved on it. And it was found in layers of rock, layers of sediments that go back to the Pliocene period, which is a geological period that goes from about 2.5 million years ago to about 5.5 million years ago. So this carved shell from England, which was reported to the scientific world in 1881 by the English geologist Henry Stopes, is over 2 million years old, far older than this shell with some squiggles on it that was just reported recently. And I was looking at the pictures of the engravings on this recently discovered shell, and if you look at the picture, it looks to me like it could even be writing.
Right, yeah.
It looks like, if you look at that picture, I don't know if you've got it there, but
we've got it on our website, and it's people can find it in the news.
The word Jim looks like a J-I-M.
Jim was here.
I don't know. Yeah, but it is some kind of symbolic marking. So it is a step in the right direction for mainstream archaeology. But the question for them would be, who made it? They would want to say some kind of ape man, some kind of being that wasn't a human being like us. But, you know, you have to understand where this discovery was actually made. Actually, they're not talking about a new discovery. They're talking about some shells that were collected over 100 years ago, back in the 1890s, by a Dutch researcher named Eugene Dubois. And he had gone to Java, that's where these shells are from, to a place called Trinil, because he was looking for what they called the missing link. if you believe in evolution, which I don't, but if you believe in evolution, you have to believe there was some kind of creature between the ancient apes and monkeys that evolved into human beings like us. So he was looking for that. And at this place called Trenel, where he collected these shells, what the scientists did is they looked in a museum in the Netherlands, in Holland, where these shells are still there in their collections, and they noticed these squiggles on one of the shells. But more important for the whole story of human antiquity is the bones that were discovered by Dubois at this same location where the shells were found. And he found a very primitive ape-like skull cap, the top part of a skull. And he found some human-like thigh bones. And he put the two together and called it the Java ape man, which is now known as Homo erectus.
That's right. Kind of a pointed head, wasn't it?
That's in the textbooks, but what we don't read in the textbooks is that in the 1970s, two English scientists carefully examined those thigh bones that he found along with the skull cap, and they found they were not like Homo erectus femurs or thigh bones. They were exactly like modern human thigh bones. And they concluded they probably don't belong with the skull at all, which means, since they were found in the same layers as the skull, which is the same layers that these shells were found in that you were mentioning, that means that over 500,000 years ago, there were some ape men existing in Java, but there were also human beings like us existing in Java. And I would say it was one of those human beings like us that perhaps made the squiggle marks on the shells that everybody's talking about.
And the fact that they
community at the present moment.
The fact that they found these human bones near the ancient Java-type bones, what does that tell you, too? Might they have killed each other or something strange like that?
Your voice dropped out. I couldn't hear the last thing that you said.
Okay. The fact that the bones were found near the Java man's bones, what I would call the modern man bones, what does that tell you? Was there some kind of a fight, an altercation? What happened?
Well, what it showed, there could have been a fight, there could have been an altercation, but what it does show is a picture not of evolution, but of coexistence. It shows that humans like us were coexisting with ape men over 500,000 years ago in Java. And not just in Java, but all over the world. Ape men were there, but humans like us were also present. And there's evidence for that today even. It takes you into a whole topic, the evidence for living ape men, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, Himalayan snowmen, things like that. So it appears just like there's evidence that humans like us today are coexisting with different kinds of ape men and different kinds of apes and monkeys. That was also true in the ancient past as well, going back hundreds of thousands, even millions and millions of years. Human beings like us were existing, and beings which are what we could call ape men were also existing. So that's what the pattern indicates to me. Now, whether they were living peacefully alongside each other or perhaps in conflict with each other, you'd have to look a little more carefully at the evidence to see what the story was. It could be either way.
Michael, one of your books, Human Devolution, of course, the Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory, and of course you do not accept the evolutionary theory. So you approach it from what perspective, if you don't believe in Darwin's theory?
Well, I approach it in this perspective. I think we have to ask, what is a human being? And today, most scientists will say we're just machines made of molecules. The English evolutionary scientist Richard Dawkins said, we're survival machines, we're robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. So they would say, well, we're just machines made of molecules, and if you want to explain how we came about, you just have to explain how some simple chemicals came together to form the first living thing, and then those gradually transformed by evolution, by natural selection, into more complex forms, such as human beings like us. I don't accept that idea. I accept that originally we're beings of pure consciousness, and we come from a conscious source. There's a conscious, intelligent source of all living things, and that conscious, intelligent source of all living things has given us various kinds of vehicles, which we call
Hold on, Michael. We'll come back. We'll talk more and take some calls next. And welcome back to Coast. Michael Cremo with us this hour, and of course his websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Michael, before we go to calls, I cannot escape without talking to you about, of course, the Vedic alternative to that theory that we were talking about. Something huge happened on this planet a long time ago. They had high technology. I'm convinced of it. I think you are too. What do you think happened? Did they blow themselves up? Something happened.
I think there are periodic devastations that take place on this planet. And this is something that's just borne out by geology. If you look at the long history of the Earth, you see there have been periodic catastrophes. Even mainstream paleontologists say there have been 6 major extinction events that have taken place in the long history of life on Earth over the past 2 billion years or so. Of course, what they fail to recognize is that humans like us were present during all these vast periods of time, but they do recognize the existence of periodic catastrophes. But I believe that we live in a multi-level cosmos, and just like people are getting into cloud computing these days, that means you can store your pictures and your files and your music on the cloud, and then if your device gets destroyed or something, you can always download it again from the cloud. So I think, periodically human civilization does get wiped out on this level of reality on this planet that we now inhabit. But from higher levels of the cosmos, you could say the files are there to download, to reboot the whole system and get it going again. And I think that's happened many times in the long history of humanity on this earth.
Michael, we have people who believe the planet's only 6,000 years old, and then we have, of course, the archaeologists who talk about 4.5 billion years old as a planet. Yet you believe, of course, that mankind might be hundreds of millions of years old. Why hasn't modern science caught up with you?
Well, they're very much attached to their current ideas, and I think they realize that the alternatives to the current ideas are going to involve some non-material principles. They're going to involve some type of conscious, intelligent agency that's responsible for the order and complexity that we observe around us in the universe. I ran into this recently at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. I was giving a lecture, actually, about my book, Human Devolution, a Vedic Alternative to Darwin's Theories, and an atheist professor from the university came to cause some trouble. So there was some interesting fireworks. Somebody videotaped the whole thing, and it's on my Facebook page, Michael Cremo, It's Really Me. I've got a link to that video, so you can see for yourself what kind of opposition there is when I start talking about ideas like this.
Okay, let's go to some of the calls for you. We'll go to Allison in Los Angeles to get things started, west of the Rockies. Hello, Allison. Go ahead.
Hello, great. Thanks so much for this show. I really appreciate your work. Is it Mr. Cremo?
Yes,
Cremo.
it is.
Cremo
Michael
with a
Cremo,
C.
That's right.
Cremo. Really appreciate your take, and just wanted to ask, what do you feel is the creation of melanin richness and melanin recessiveness on the planet, the different hues that we now end up politically calling race? And do you talk to indigenous people around the world, like some of the ancient ones, like the Hopi and the Maya that came from the Olmec, or the Igbo in Africa, and ask them what they feel from their own very ancient creation stories are the reasons for the different hues on the planets, and also dealing with interdimensional beings as well, as you're alluding to?
Right. Well, I do try to stay in contact with people of all different kinds of backgrounds, and in my book, Human Devolution, I have a chapter on cross-cultural study of cosmologies, and actually next June 2015, I'm going to be on a spiritual cruise to Alaska, and I'm going to be speaking about the relationships among all these various cosmologies, like the Tlingit Indian shamanic cosmology of the Alaskan tribal peoples, and the Vedic cosmology of ancient India, and things like that. So I am interested in these things. And as far as the bodies of people are concerned, yes, there are different skin colors and things like that, but as far as our existence as beings of pure consciousness is concerned, we're all the same on that level. That's how I look at it. There's an internal unity. There's some external diversity, but there's an internal unity to all human beings.
Michael, what got you into all this? How did you start?
Well, I think it has something to do with the way I grew up. My father was a military intelligence officer, and that meant I was, our family was living in different parts of the United States and different parts of the world. So I got exposed to a lot of different ideas and cultures as I was growing up. And among all the ones that I was exposed to, the spiritual culture of ancient India was the one that made the most sense to me. Ideas like reincarnation, for example, the idea of cyclical time, the idea of extreme human antiquity. These ideas made a lot of sense to me. So I got into seeing, is there any scientific evidence for all of this? Is there any scientific evidence for a conscious self that can exist apart from the body and that can reincarnate from body to body? Is there any archaeological evidence that humans have always existed on this planet? So that's what got me into my research.
Okay, let's go to Rick now in Kettering, Ohio, east of the Rockies. Rick, you're on with Michael Cremo. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good, Rick. Thank you.
Yeah. What I was wondering is, or what I believe actually, is that we've reached this level and higher as far as technology before, and then several times, and that our ancestors would have left the planet, seeded out, and then at some time had come back in various forms, such as the Anunnaki, or you got the tribe in Africa that says they're from, now I forget the name of the star.
The Sirius star system.
The Dogon people of Africa.
Yeah, and, that's my thinking on it, that we've been here before as far as technology and past that point, and then something would happen, not necessarily a war. It could be like what your one guest was discussing last night, a deep freeze and maybe a pole shift or whatever, and they had to leave.
A little bit of
things settled down.
A little bit of the Zecharia Sitchin theory, Michael.
Yeah, well, the parts that I agree with are that, yes, there is an extraterrestrial element to the story. in one sense, I think we're all extraterrestrials. As beings of pure consciousness, none of us are from here. We're all from somewhere else, and I think we're on our way back there. And as far as higher levels of technological development, I think that is true. If we look at the ancient Sanskrit writings, they tell us that people in ancient times had spacecraft. They were called vimanas. They seem to have been able to travel not just from place to place within this dimension of reality, but they were also able to travel in these vimanas or spacecraft to other dimensions of reality, sort of like you see in Star Trek going into shifting into other levels of reality. So I think the basic ideas that the caller is talking about are ideas that I can agree with, that in the ancient past, humans had higher levels of technology, that we have been able to travel from planet to planet, from dimension to dimension, and that there have been periodic catastrophes.
There's no doubt about that. Do you think it's conceivable, too, that, as we look at all these past civilizations, and that, of course, there might have been some atomic explosion, maybe a war, but is it possible that some of the artifacts that have been left behind have been confiscated by the very wealthy, by the elitists, and they have them? They have them maybe in their homes or private museums?
I think that is possible. Sometimes there's stuff in museums that people just aren't aware of. Actually, this recent discovery that we were talking about of the shells that have, symbolic carvings on them. They've been sitting in a museum for over 100 years, and they were just noticed within the past year or two by archaeologists who happen to be going through the old collections. And I've done that myself. There are museums in this country and in Europe that have in their collections things that just aren't shown to the public, which, like the California gold mine discoveries, which I believe are over 50 million years old. They're stone tools and weapons. They're in a museum here in the United States. They're not displayed to the public, but they are there. So these kinds of things can happen. Sometimes things can go missing from museum collections. For example, that carved shell with a human face carved on it from England, that was reported in scientific journals. There are photographs of it, but it's gone missing. It was in a private collection, and that private collection of Henry Stopes was given to a museum in England, and some university was in charge of going through the collection, and I asked the archaeologist who was in charge if the shell was there, and he said no. So you can think what you're talking about, George, is something very real. It's part of the whole process of what I call knowledge filtration that goes on, that there can be things in museums and private collections that most people really aren't aware of.
Let's go next to Will in Manhattan. Hey, Will, thanks for calling.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Hello to your guests. I agree with you that I think mankind has been wiped out a few times and just restarted itself. But my question is about evolution. You said you don't believe in it. Correct me if I'm wrong. We breed out characteristics out of animals all the time, like dysplasia in a German Shepherd. We add another dog to it, and we can show up that problem. Or those horses in Puerto Rico that don't gallop, they glide, and we do that all the time. Isn't that evolution sped up?
Well, there's a kind of variation that I think does happen. Like you were speaking about breeding dogs. You can breed dogs to be big or small or have have long hair or short hair, but actually they're all still dogs. They can mate together. So I think you can do that. Now, if you could breed a dog with wings, now that would be something, more like what evolution is talking about. Having new features of organisms come into existence. That we don't see. We can see you can breed a species to have variation. You can observe that. That's observable. What we don't observe is one species turning into another. So that's where I would kind of draw the line. Some people would call it the distinction between what they call microevolution and macroevolution. In other words, you can get minor variations within a species. That we know. You gave some examples, and I agree with that. But what we don't find is the ability to breed animals so that they have radically new features, like take an animal that doesn't have eyes and breed it so that it has eyes.
Yeah.
That we don't see.
Do you think the Baghdad museum had all kinds of artifacts in it that have now been stolen?
The looting of museum collections in war zones is a big problem.
Huge.
Archaeologists talk about it. I regularly go to present papers at meetings of the World Archaeological Congress, the European Association of Archaeologists, and it is a big problem that they're very concerned about, that when you have civil disturbances or wars in areas, one thing that does happen is that people, for various reasons and from various groups, do try to loot museum collections. That does happen.
Let's go to Leanne in Milwaukee. She's a first-time caller. Go ahead, Leanne.
Well, regarding the missing artifacts, don't those things have provenance, so that if they should ever pop up elsewhere, they'd be recognized, or you could trace back to the original owner, kind of like a piece of art?
Well, they don't show up, though. That's the problem. They stay hidden away, sold to some rich person, and we never see them again.
But that's always happened. It's not like it's some new development. I mean, how do some countries end up, with some things or not, and how do, I'm sure somebody has sticky fingers. It's not, always like that, I guess.
Yeah, and, I think you're right. It's always been going on. In some cases, they have been able to repatriate objects that have been discovered in museums in, say, America and France and England and other places that turn out to have a questionable history, that they've been looted or been...
And the Nazis loved it, Michael, didn't they? The Nazis loved looting and...
Right.
Taking...
There's some cases recently where some looted artwork is being repatriated to its owners. I guess there are... So I think the caller's right. I think you're also right, George, that sometimes things disappear into private collections.
Yes.
And, they can't be recognized. If they do come out of the private collections and go on to eBay or something, then
they get discovered pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
Anyway, Michael, we're out of time. I want to thank you for spending the hour with us. Have a great holiday, my friend, and if there's anything we can do for you, you just holler, okay?
Okay. Thank you very much, George. It's been good to be with you and all the Coast to Coast listeners.
Michael Cremo's website, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. When I come back, we're going to take a walk on the paranormal side. Don't go away. You're listening to Coast to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.